Emily Carter was the kind of daughter every parent dreamed of. Quiet, brilliant, polite. But when her parents discovered the truth buried beneath their shed and hidden deep in the woods, they realized they hadn't raised a model citizen. They had raised a monster. The Carter family lived on the edge of Maple Hollow, a quiet town where everyone knew each other by name. Their white brick house, surrounded by tall pines and an immaculately trimmed lawn, stood as a symbol of comfort and stability. Tom Carter worked as a math teacher at the local high school, and Elaine Carter ran a small bakery downtown. Their only daughter, Emily, had been a quiet child from the very beginning. She never cried much, never broke the rules, and never brought trouble home. To outsiders, it was the perfect family. Nothing seemed out of place. Emily was always different, but never in a way that raised concern. She didn't talk much, but she listened. Her teachers described her as observant, respectful, and academically gifted. While other children laughed in the hallways or chased each other around the schoolyard, Emily sat under trees alone, reading or drawing strange pictures in her notebook. Some of her classmates called her eerie, but no one ever felt threatened by her. The Carter family brushed off her oddities, believing she was simply introverted, a deep thinker. Her mother would proudly say that Emily was mature beyond her years. As she grew older, Emily's quiet nature only deepened. She barely used social media and avoided crowds. She declined party invitations, skipped dances, and spent weekends painting in her bedroom or going on long walks in the woods behind their house. She had no close friends, but she didn't seem to need any. Her parents assumed it was just her personality, harmless and independent. They never questioned what she did during those solitary walks, never followed her into the trees that bordered their backyard. After all, there was nothing to be concerned about. She came home on time, never got into trouble, and never showed signs of rebellion. Emily graduated high school with honors and was accepted into a well-known liberal arts college. Her parents couldn't have been prouder. The shy little girl they raised had grown into a responsible young woman, ready to take on the world. They threw her a small graduation party, invited neighbors, and displayed her paintings throughout the house. Everyone smiled, complimented her talents, and wished her luck on her next chapter. But behind the smiles, a darker truth simmered, invisible to everyone. Emily had developed a fascination with disappearance cases, ones the media often labeled as tragic, but unsolved. She read about them obsessively: girls who vanished on their way home, teens who were never seen again after a walk in the park. She never talked about this interest. It remained hidden, like so much of what she truly thought and felt. Then one day, a teenage girl from the next town over went missing. The search made local headlines. Flyers were posted in stores, and volunteers combed through the woods. The Carters noticed the news, talked about how sad it was, but didn't imagine their daughter had anything to do with it. They didn't realize this was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, the missing persons cases began to accumulate in a quiet but deeply unsettling pattern. 7 girls, all between the ages of 15 and 19, vanished across 3 neighboring counties. None of the disappearances appeared violent. There were no witnesses, no distress calls, and no signs of struggle. Each girl seemed to have simply disappeared during ordinary parts of her day, walking to the library, biking home from school, or heading to a friend's house. The towns affected were small and rural, and the police departments were overwhelmed, underfunded, and mostly unprepared for cases of this complexity. No one had put the full picture together yet, but something sinister was unfolding in plain sight. Investigators initially treated each case as an isolated incident. Flyers were printed, vigils were held, families pleaded on local news channels. But behind closed doors, law enforcement began to notice chilling similarities. Several girls had been last seen near wooded areas or on quiet rural roads that stretched between towns. Each had no known enemies, and most lived fairly routine, drama-free lives. The girls came from different backgrounds and schools, but one detail kept resurfacing: a pale sedan spotted near the locations around the times they disappeared. Eventually, the Department of Public Safety pulled together a multi-agency task force. They pored over traffic cam footage, cell tower data, and public reports. The pale sedan showed up again and again. It was eventually traced back to a car registered under the name Tom Carter. The discovery surprised investigators. It didn't match any known suspects. A teacher with a clean record and no criminal ties. But when they dug deeper, they found that the vehicle was primarily used by his daughter, Emily Carter. At first glance, Emily's connection to the victims seemed tenuous. She didn't know any of them personally, didn't attend the same school, and hadn't been involved in any known altercations. But then they began mapping her movements using license plate readers and GPS data pulled from nearby surveillance. In 4 out of the 7 disappearances, she had been in the vicinity within an hour of the girls going missing. In one case, a gas station camera caught her car turning onto a forest road just minutes after the last confirmed sighting of a missing girl. It was no longer coincidence, it was a pattern. Still, the evidence was circumstantial. Without direct proof, they couldn't make an arrest. So law enforcement launched quiet surveillance. They followed Emily's routines for a month, documenting her comings and goings. She lived alone in an off-campus apartment, but regularly returned to her childhood home in Maple Hollow. Most nights were uneventful, until one evening she drove to the edge of a state forest and parked her car along an unmarked trail. She disappeared into the trees alone and didn't return until well past midnight. Curious and concerned, investigators secretly searched her vehicle the following day. Inside the trunk, they discovered a folded plastic tarp, stained with what appeared to be blood. There was also a hunting knife, clean but recently sharpened, and a prepaid burner phone with no contacts, only coordinates marked on a map app. The evidence was chilling, but not yet enough to prove murder. The task force turned their focus to the Carter home. Tom and Elaine Carter had no reason to suspect that their daughter Yas's life was being scrutinized by a dedicated team of investigators. They carried on with their daily routines, unaware that law enforcement was slowly closing in. When detectives knocked on their door a second time, the tone had changed. This visit wasn't casual. The questions were more pointed, the pauses heavier. The Carters cooperated as they always had, confused but compliant. Yet behind their words was a rising unease. Something didn't feel right. Detectives explained that Emily's name had appeared in relation to several open missing persons cases. They didn't accuse her outright, but implied the connection was serious. Tom denied any wrongdoing. Elaine, pale and shaken, insisted her daughter was incapable of violence. Emily was sensitive, quiet, artistic. She didn't even raise her voice at home. But when shown a list of the missing girls and the GPS logs from the burner phone, their confidence wavered. Tom and Elaine agreed to a full search of the property. They wanted to clear their daughter's name, convinced it was all some misunderstanding. Police brought in forensics teams, dogs trained to detect human remains, and specialists to examine every inch of the Carter residence and surrounding land. What they found would shatter everything the Carters believed about their daughter. At first, the search turned up nothing, but behind the house was an old shed, one Emily had claimed years ago as her art studio. It had always been locked. She told her parents she preferred her privacy while painting, and they respected that. But when police forced the door open, what they uncovered inside made seasoned officers recoil. Stacked on shelves were personal items, bracelets, notebooks, scarves, and faded photographs, all belonging to the missing girls. Each item had been carefully labeled and organized in neat rows. Some were tucked inside clear plastic bags with the victims' names written in small, perfect handwriting. On the far wall hung a cork board covered in newspaper clippings about the disappearances, along with marked maps, timelines, and hand-drawn sketches of faces. Some familiar, some not. Even more disturbing was the discovery of a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside it, police found a series of photographs, each showing one of the missing girls just before they disappeared. In some, the victims appeared unaware they were being watched. In others, they looked frightened. One photo showed a girl tied to a tree, her eyes wide with terror. The timestamp matched the last known sighting of the victim. It was undeniable now. Emily had been watching, tracking, and ultimately capturing these girls. The shed wasn't an art studio, it was a trophy room. It served as both a shrine and a journal of her crimes. As the evidence mounted, Tom and Elaine's faces turned hollow. Their daughter, the child they had raised with love and trust, had been leading a double life filled with darkness and cruelty. Investigators informed them gently but firmly Emily was no longer a person of interest. She was now the prime suspect in a string of connected abductions, and likely, murders. The burner phone discovered in Emily A.'s car contained a series of GPS pins that led investigators deep into the woods beyond Maple Hollow. One of the locations was tied to a small, decrepit cabin that didn't appear on any official property records. After some digging, authorities traced the cabin's purchase back to a false identity, one that matched the fake name used to buy the prepaid phone. With a search warrant in hand, officers arrived at the site, surrounded by dense forest and eerie silence. The cabin was modest from the outside, aged timber, cracked windows, overgrown moss, but what lay inside made clear it was more than just a forgotten structure. The space had no running water or electricity. It had been outfitted deliberately with plastic-lined floors, heavy metal chains bolted to the walls, and a crude table covered in tools that looked more like instruments of torture than anything else. The air was damp and rotting, the smell unmistakable. Dried blood was found smeared on parts of the floor, along with strands of hair later confirmed to belong to one of the missing girls. Outside the cabin, investigators spread out. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and ground-penetrating radar swept the nearby clearing. Within hours, the first shallow grave was uncovered, then another and another. In total, 7 burial sites were located within a 2-mile radius of the cabin, each containing the remains of a teenage girl. All had been missing for months, some even years. DNA confirmed their identities within days. Among the evidence collected from the cabin was a leather-bound journal, stuffed into a rusted lockbox beneath a loose floorboard. Emily had documented her actions in chilling detail, how she stalked each victim, what tactics she used to lure them, and how she avoided detection. The writing was emotionless, more like notes from an experiment than a confession. She referred to the girls not by name but by number, and she noted things like their expressions, the sounds they made, and how long they lasted. There was no remorse, only calculation. Worse still, at the end of the journal was a list of future targets. Some were familiar names, girls from her college, a neighbor's niece, even the daughter of one of her father's co-workers. Some names had check marks next to them. Others were marked with dates that hadn't yet arrived. The scale and precision of Emily's actions left investigators stunned. She had maintained a perfect facade. Top grades, no criminal record, no public outbursts. She'd avoided all the usual warning signs. Her control over her image was almost as terrifying as the crimes themselves. Emily was arrested without incident. She offered no resistance, no explanation. The only thing she said was a soft confirmation of her name. To those watching, she seemed calm, even bored. But the weight of what had been discovered couldn't be ignored. She was no longer a mystery. She was a calculated predator with a body count, and she had planned to keep going until someone stopped her. The trial of Emily Carter became one of the most sensational cases in state history. The courtroom overflowed with reporters, victims' families, and locals who had once smiled politely at the Carters during grocery runs or community events. The image of the quiet, soft-spoken girl next door had been permanently shattered. Now, the world knew her as a predator, a meticulous, emotionless killer who had hunted without detection for years. The prosecution built its case around overwhelming physical evidence: the photographs, the items stored in the shed, the journal found in the cabin, and DNA recovered from the burial sites. Each discovery painted the same picture, a calculated campaign of surveillance, capture, and execution. There were no pleas of insanity, no signs of coercion, and no history of trauma that might explain what she'd done. Experts described Emily as methodically detached, someone who viewed people as subjects of interest rather than fellow human beings. Her academic records, once a source of pride, now seemed like tools of manipulation, a way to maintain her cover while she committed unspeakable acts in the shadows. Emily never showed remorse. She sat quietly during every hearing, never flinching as the prosecution detailed how each victim had been found. When asked by the judge if she wanted to make a statement before sentencing, she declined. Not a single word. The courtroom remained silent, heavy with anticipation, but she said nothing. That silence, more than any testimony, haunted everyone who watched. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge made it clear the state would never risk releasing someone capable of such cruelty. Her parents were not present for the sentencing. By then, Tom and Elaine Carter had disappeared from public life entirely. After the arrest, they had quit their jobs, sold their house, and left Maple Hollow. Rumors spread that they had changed their identities and moved to another state. Some believed they were protecting themselves. Others believed they were hiding from guilt. Despite being cleared of any involvement, the Carters were never free of suspicion in the eyes of the public. People questioned how they could live under the same roof as a serial killer and know nothing. Had they ignored warning signs? Were they in denial? Or were they simply victims of their own blind love? These questions were never answered, and the Carters never spoke to the media. Years later, documentaries and books continued to examine Emily's case. Some labeled her a rare female serial killer driven by obsession. Others speculated she had no motive beyond control and curiosity. But the most disturbing truth was also the simplest. Emily Carter never fit any expected mold. She didn't snap, she didn't lash out, she planned, watched, and waited. She killed with precision, and then went back to her quiet life without a second glance. The case left behind more than just grief. It left fear. Fear that evil could hide in the calmest faces, and that even the people you know best might carry secrets too dark to imagine.